Now it's time for 3x3 Experiment by JCD. Comparing stories from ABC, CBS, and NBC. The never-ending 3x3.
Now to those sharp comments from former Vice President Pence declaring, quote, President Trump is wrong. It's his strongest criticism yet of the former president's assertion that Pence could have overturned the 2020 election results. Here's Kristen Welker.
In a stunning public break with the man who was once his boss, former Vice President Mike Pence today rebuked former President Trump for pressuring him to overturn the results of the 2020 election.
President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election.
That fiery criticism comes after just this week, Mr. Trump said about Pence he could have overturned the election.
And frankly, there is no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president.
The vice president could not have overturned the election. Still, Mr. Trump continues to push these false claims.
The 2020 election was rigged. And everyone knows it.
All of it happening as Republicans are pushing back on the two fiercest GOP critics of Mr. Trump in Congress. Today, the Republican National Committee voted to censure Representatives Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger for joining the committee investigating January 6th when rioters stormed the Capitol. Every other Republican boycotted the committee, which is made up of virtually all Democrats.
This is a pure political committee. I think those two individuals would have a hard time ever coming back to Congress.
As for Pence's comments, they appear to be the clearest sign yet he's seriously considering a run in 2024. Meanwhile, a Trump aide tonight telling NBC News Pence's comments are disingenuous and that Pence is just trying to become relevant. Lester.
All right, Kristen Welker, thank you.
Let's turn now to that breaking news. There are few Republicans that are willing to publicly take on Donald Trump. But today, for the first time, former Vice President Mike Pence criticized his boss for trying to overturn the 2020 election. CBS's Catherine Herridge has more on a remarkable day within the GOP.
In searing comments about the January 6th riots, the former vice president took on his old boss.
President Trump said I had the right to overturn the election. President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election.
Addressing a conservative conference in Florida, the public rebuke seemed especially striking.
The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. And frankly, there is no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president.
The ayes have it.
In a vote that seems to symbolize a divide among Republicans, the RNC today censured Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney for serving on the January 6th committee, calling it a Democrat-led persecution of ordinary citizens engaged in legitimate political discourse. In response, Cheney tweeted video from January 6th, writing, "This is not legitimate political discourse." More than 225 people have been charged for assaulting law enforcement. 3 weeks before the Capitol attack, emails and draft orders obtained by CBS News show President Trump's outside advisors considered authorizing the Secretary of Homeland Security to seize all machines. Another draft order looked to grant similar powers to the Defense Secretary. Emails indicate the draft orders were circulated by a former Army Colonel Phil Waldron to a small group, including Rudy Giuliani, former New York City Police Commissioner Bernie Kerik, and Trump's former National Security Advisor, General Michael Flynn, who said this at the time about the president's options.
He could immediately, on his order, seize every single one of these machines around the country on his order.
And in that speech today, Pence took direct aim at President Trump, saying January 6th was a dark day. And Pence seemed to telegraph his own political ambitions, adding that Vice President Harris will also have no authority to overturn the 2024 election when Pence said Republicans would win. Nora.
Just extraordinary. Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
We turn next tonight to former Vice President Mike Pence, late today striking back at former President Trump, saying President Trump is wrong to say that Pence, as vice president, had the right to overturn the election. Pence then saying there is almost no idea more un-American. It comes on the same day the Republican Party went after two members of Congress for continuing to ask questions about who helped plan and orchestrate the January 6th attack. Here's our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl, on the former vice president and what he said.
Tonight, something we have never heard before from Mike Pence, declaring Donald Trump is wrong when he said that as vice president, Pence had the right to change the outcome and could have overturned the 2020 election.
I heard this week that President Trump said I had the right to overturn the election. But President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election. The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. And frankly, there is no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president.
On January 6th and in the days before, the former president put enormous pressure in private and in public on Pence to overturn the election.
I hope Mike is going to do the right thing. I hope so. I hope so. Because if Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election.
Today, Pence said that doing what Trump demanded would have been a clear violation of the U.S. Constitution, delivering a warning to his own party.
I understand the disappointment many feel about the last election. I was on the ballot. And the truth is, there's more at stake than our party or political fortunes. Men and women, if we lose faith in the Constitution, we won't just lose elections. We'll lose our country.
But just hours before Pence spoke, the Republican Party went in the other direction, voting at their annual meeting to censure the 2 Republican members of Congress who were taking part in the January 6th investigation. The censure resolution condemned Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois and Liz Cheney of Wyoming for, quote, participating in a Democrat-led persecution of ordinary citizens engaged in legitimate political discourse. In response, Congresswoman Cheney tweeted this video of the attack on the Capitol. This was January 6th, Cheney wrote. This is not, quote, legitimate political discourse. After the resolution passed, the RNC put out a statement insisting that they weren't referring to the violence at the Capitol as legitimate political discourse, despite the words of its resolution. But, David, it is unclear what, quote, ordinary citizens it refers to. Cheney and Kinzinger allegedly persecuting, if not those that attacked the Capitol. We've asked, but we haven't heard a clarification about who or what they were talking about.
All right, Jonathan Karl live in Washington. John, thank you.
There's so many bees.